welcome to Latino Talk TV. I'm your host, Jose Luis Jimenez.
And I'm Ben Mendez.
I'm Greg Compian.
And welcome back. And we're actually honored to be here live on the show once again. We're starting our 4th season.
Can you believe it? Already 4 years.
4 years of being live on the air, and hopefully this year we won't get kicked off again. No, we're just kidding. We're kind of too busy being troublemakers, but we're going to have a great show tonight. We're going to talk about the business of politics. We're going to talk about the insides of what it really takes to get into the political world. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. We're not here to talk about that, but we're really going to talk about why people actually submit themselves to something that crazy, right?
Well, let's get into it. Obama just supported gay marriage. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Greg?
And it's a hot topic, and I tell you that I don't understand why he took that stand right now, not even having to make a stand. He's either going to be the smartest man in the room or very, very bad move. One of the two.
It's kind of interesting to see who's behind all that. Mm-hmm. Who's the one really making the decisions? Is it the political consultants, or who is it? The party?
No, that's a good question, because right now I keep reading those articles, and now all of a sudden it's like GLBT issues are now Latino issues, and it's all being lumped into one thing, as if, GLBT, Latino, and what's the other hot topic? It's a big deal right now. I forgot, but it's all it seems to be one, and women's issues, right? I don't think they're all the same thing. What do you think?
Well, there's going to be a lot of discussion now that the election's coming around. Election's in 2 weeks, by the way, for primaries. Did you know that?
Yeah.
May 29th is election day.
I voted early last week, yeah. and it looked like all indications the people need to get out and vote. I mean, the early vote is going to depend. It's going to have a large effect because, it's not in March, and this May 29th date may cause a little confusion. So people, we need to encourage you to get out and vote for whoever it is your candidate is, but get out and have your voice.
On that note, there was a couple groups that got together this Saturday. Mm-hmm. They had a get-together called Taco de Votos, or Taco de Votes. And basically, it was a big push to bring out the Latino community to come out and vote. And I'm happy to say that the National Hispanic Professional Organization Leadership Institute was very much involved in that.
So why did they actually do that? I mean, was there any positive impact afterwards?
Oh, most definitely. We had a great turnout, for one, and we pushed people to the polls because the polling location was right there. It was at Bayland Park, by the way.
Here in Houston, Texas, Bayland Park. So, I was kind of trying to be a devil's advocate here, Fred, but truth is, I think it really impacted that day's vote, because the very next day there was a huge drop in early voting. Is that correct?
They had an interesting concept. I had never seen this done before. They had the mariachis go around to the different apartment complexes, and people were actually coming out of the apartments to hear what was going on, all the commotion. Mm-hmm. And once they got out, then they were told about what was happening, and they were pushing them to the polls.
I tell you one thing, that whatever it takes to drive the vote out, very important that people realize and recognize the importance of your vote and getting involved in the whole electoral system. And people may not think that one vote may not count, but you got so many votes, there's so many different candidates in that one particular race will impact a runoff and whatever. So every vote counts.
No, I agree. I think every vote does count. As of right now, I haven't voted, but I do have a little bit of time, and I'm definitely going to make it happen. Right now, let's get into what were they thinking. I think there's been some things been going on in the community.
Well, I tell you what, the first story that comes to mind was the Chad Hawley verdict.
Yeah.
I mean, the police officer got off scot-free, basically, no punishment. What are your thoughts on that, Greg?
I tell you that the effect that it's going to have afterward, the chilling effect that it's going to have on the community as far as voter apathy, people. I mean, you look at the dynamic of the jury, and you look at all that, but I'm more concerned of the chilling effect afterward that it'll have on community as far as people wanting to take a stand, voice their opinion, get involved, make statements to the police officers. That's what, could be seen.
Well, I will tell you that he is the first of 4 police officers to go to trial.
But wasn't he the main one? Let's recap what really happened so that may not have heard.
So basically we had a 15-year-old boy, or young man, named Chad Hawley. He was being chased, and the police officers chased him, and they were videotaping. This was the key, the videotape. And once the videotape came out, then it caused all kinds of commotion in the black community, rightly so, because you had HPD officers abusing their power.
So some would say that they didn't. I saw the videos, and my previous work experience, I saw there's a fine line and gray area. It looked like the young man, when he got hit by the car, because the car clipped him, he laid down, put his hands behind his head. Isn't that the moment that you stop and just put the handcuffs on and get done with it?
Well, you would think so. It's amazing to me that the jury did not find him guilty of anything. I mean, basically, he was free to walk. I would, at least at the minimum, had the jury, or actually the judge and the jury, take away some kind of rights that he had as far as being a police officer in the future.
I tell you that, the system is in place. It's only obvious that there were some things that, for whatever reason, got through that maybe shouldn't have. But I tell you that what's going to happen here afterward is that there again, the chilling effect that it's going to have on the community and what stands. And you look at the immigrant community and how they don't want to take advantage. I mean, they don't want to be taken advantage of. Unfortunately, they get taken advantage of because they're afraid to participate in giving statements and whatever to the police. So,
you know what's interesting also is that the mayor and the DA's office were, I guess, not in agreement with the jury. And so they, like us, we're outsiders. And it's interesting. Well, actually, the DA is on the inside, but it's interesting to see what will happen in the future. But I have another story that I wanted to share with you. Are we done with that topic?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Let's move on. The dog napping suspects in custody is a headline in the Houston Chronicle. Basically, we had a mother and her 2 kids go into a pet store and steal a dog. And they just walked out and they had it on videotape. And it's my understanding that the lady is in custody. But, she was taking her 2 kids along for the ride. I mean, come on. If this lady is indeed caught, I mean, something needs to happen here. For one, she's giving those kids the wrong lessons, learning how to steal from a pet store. I mean, come on. You grab the dog and run out? That's unbelievable.
Well, what's really going to happen now? Think about it. Yeah, the lady is teaching her kids how to steal. And that's not very uncommon, unfortunately. There's plenty of things like that happening all the time. But now she got caught. The kids are going to get taken away. They're going to go to Child Protective Services. And then what?
Good question.
It's a doggone shame.
Yeah. It's unfortunate.
Well, hopefully the kids, aren't taken away from their family. But if the family is a bad influence, hopefully they'll be able to find something better.
And then the other story is the John Goodman story. He's the one that he adopted his girlfriend so that she could have some of the monies. You recall that? So he was just recently put in jail. He was sentenced. And his sentence was 15 or 16 years. Now, he's going to be serving a long time. Hopefully his money is put to good use.
Well, I think his kid or his girlfriend or whatever it is now, she might be able to use the money a little bit. What do you think?
I tell you, if you look at the past trial with Anna Nicole and Marshall and how long it got drug out and what have you, I don't think there's no clear winner. So I don't know. I guess it's wait and see.
And then the next story, the young man that was at a college campus, and he was at Rutgers University filming his roommate having sex. It was 2 males having sex. And so basically he got 30 days in jail for committing that so-called crime, for videotaping. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think he should have never done that. And even though, political issues may be whatever they are, there needs to be respect, and that should have never happened. I think that was just a terrible situation, and unfortunately the young man committed suicide, and I think that's a tragic, tragic loss.
Yeah, it's very, very bad, especially if, I guess it could be considered a form of bullying also.
I think it is bullying.
Yeah, terrible.
I'm done.
You're done?
I'm done.
Right now, what I want to do is give you the phone number. It is 281-846-5079. It is a live TV show right now. We want you to call in. We're about to take a quick break, and we're going to get into our first guest and talk about the business of politics, the dirty truths, okay? So we'll be right back. You're watching Latino Talk TV. de Leon. What's your proper title?
What?
Oh, are we back on? Welcome back. You're watching Latino Talk TV, and this is the beauty of live television right now. They're like all pointing at me. Where are you at? Okay, we're here now with Hector de Leon with Harris County Clerk's Office, and he's pretty much, in our community, he's pretty much the guy who runs the show, but we know that's not the whole case. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to get into some logistical issues of the vote and why this is so critical of getting people out to vote right now, okay? Hector, so why do people need to vote?
Well, first thing I want to say is that I work for the Harris County Clerk's Office. Stan Stannard is the new county clerk, and he is the chief elections officer of Harris County, which is the third largest county in the nation. What I do is I'm director of communications and voter outreach, and what I deal with is because Harris County is a voter rights jurisdiction, we have to implement language assistance programs for languages that have met the requirement that require voting information in, for example, Spanish, Vietnamese, and now, as of October 13th of last year, Chinese. So we do all we can to provide outreach to make sure that these communities receive the information, materials, and assistance needed to access the voting process. Aside from that, well, that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
I know last year you had a facility that was burned, and you had a lot of your equipment burned. And as a result, you had some issues. What are you changing now? Is there something different you're doing now?
Well, it was the challenge was that I think it was 50-something days, about 2 months approximately before Election Day, the Elections Technology Center where we warehoused our equipment burned down. So the challenge was actually getting the election off, and we were able to do that successfully. And in fact, by the early voting period, you didn't see any difference from the previous election to the election after the fire. For this time around, or this election, the county clerk, Stan Stannard, actually has worked very hard to acquire a location that is way better, or what we expected to get, to house the voting equipment, but also it has a lot of space that it has provided us the ability to do a lot more. Obviously, there's differences between the old building and the new building, and all the differences are positive and good for the county.
Hector, so your responsibility is to actually ensure the integrity of the vote, is that correct?
Well, that's what we do. You have to know that a lot of people, when they talk about elections, and there's a lot of people that really don't know what elections entail. Sometimes we get questions pertaining to the law, and there's a belief out there that the county actually makes up election laws, and that's just not so. All election laws and all elections in Harris County are conducted based on state and federal guidelines. This is, like I said, this is a voter rights jurisdiction. For everything that we do, it has to be submitted to the Department of Justice for clearance. For example, when we create a polling locations list, and the way that works is that we start with the same list that we had from a previous election, and then somebody is hired or contracted to review that list, and they'll go to these schools, churches, and so on and so community centers and ask the managers at those buildings, is this building available for use again during this election? If the answer is no, then we have to note it down that they told us no, the reason, and then move to find another location. Every time we make a notation about those sites, then those are reported to the Department of Justice. And when we find a new site, the commissioner where the precinct is located, the Harris County Commissioner actually will have a say along with the people on the ground, the presiding judges, and so on and so forth, because in the end, all the polling locations are actually approved by the Harris County Commissioner's Court.
So you're saying the commissioners actually have a say where the locations are at? Yeah.
They approve the locations. We work, let me give you an example. For example, and some people may not like me saying this, but there is a location at a school in the north side that was not available because it was it was being refurbished. It was not available. It was in Precinct 2. In Precinct 2. So we had to find another location. So various options were presented to the commissioner. And one option was chosen by the commissioner's office after the election because it happened that that commissioner was not successful in their re-election bid, that there was emails being sent around the blogosphere saying, well, they changed the polling locations at this, that's a blah, 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 blah. People speak without knowing that the commissioner's office itself picked the location that the polling place was in that area.
Let's talk about some numbers here. How many people are actually registered? How many people actually vote? And can you give us a breakdown of what percentage is Hispanic?
Well, at this point, there are approximately about it's close to 1.9 million registered voters in Harris County. Of those, we just did a query, and there were 307,000 Spanish surname registered voters, and this is based on a 369 surname list that is provided by the U.S. Census Bureau. So every time you do a query, you have to qualify it by saying this is an estimate, because we know that there's people who marry out who no longer have a Hispanic name, and there's people who marry in who now have a Hispanic name. But I would say that that's a conservative estimate, and there's probably more Spanish surname registered voters or Hispanics on the voter roll than 307, maybe a little bit more than 307. Give you an example, we have 1.6 million Hispanics in Harris County, and every time elected officials, especially Hispanic elected officials or partisan people on the left, when they see numbers that big, they start getting excited. They get all giddy. Oh, they think that that's going to translate into voting strength and registered voters. Well, according to a U.S. Census American Community Survey from 2007 to 2009 for Harris County, and it's about the Hispanic community in Harris County, citizenship status, sex, age, and all that, they estimated, the survey itself estimated that only 1/3 of the voting age Hispanics qualified to vote. Well, let me put it this way. There's almost 1 million voting age Hispanics in Harris County. And out of those, 51% meet the requirements to register to vote. The 1/3 is that if you divide the number that they estimated were eligible to vote and you divide it by the total population, only 1/3 of all the Hispanic population in Harris County actually meets the requirements to register to vote. So when you actually look at the number of registered voters and divide it by the number that they estimate could register to vote, the voter registration percentage is about 59%, which is exactly what the census says it should be for Harris County. The point is that people use numbers to try to make a case that somehow institutions or somebody is keeping people from being registered to vote, when the fact is the numbers that do exist are actually pretty good, because the Hispanic surname registered voters is actually inching up every year. We've crossed the 300,000 benchmark, and it's just going to keep moving up. How fast? That's always the question. And obviously there's some people that always want it to be faster than it's happening, and that's why issues are raised.
Hector, in your professional opinion, the Voter ID Act, what type of impact is that going to have? Is it positive? What from your vantage point where you're at?
Two things. It's not in effect, and it will not be in effect until the federal government approves it. That's one. Two, from the election administrator standpoint, because I work for the elections office and the chief elections officer of the county, you have to understand that when we are conducting elections, election officers have to be for strengthening the integrity of the voting process and making sure that the idea of one person, one vote, it continues to exist in the country and in this county and in the state. So when you hear election administrators, even people who are on the left, you will see that some of them support the idea of strengthening the integrity of the voting process through laws. There was a group that was co-chaired by former President Jimmy Carter and James Baker, who, after they did their analysis, they went around this country, had meetings and so on and so forth. They came out for a voter identification with a picture on it.
Well, before we go any further, I want to remind y'all that you guys can call in 281-846-5079 if you have any questions. But what I want to talk about is actually let's discuss the integrity of the vote, because I think that's a very unique or a powerful statement. Because nowadays we have things like American Idol and all these great shows that are out there, and you can vote from home. But why hasn't the election process been modernized? What can we do to get it even more modern today? Because we still have all these old machines, that there was all these accusations of voter fraud, that the machines weren't programmed properly. Why do we still have that?
All those issues had nothing to do with Harris County. And in fact, I'll give you an example. Before the 2008 election, California, the Secretary of State of California ordered what they call a top-to-bottom report. That meant that every county in California had to resubmit certification for their election equipment. After the report, the only counties that were recertified to use the equipment that they were previously using was Orange County, that was using the E-Slate electronic voting system, which is the same system that is used in Harris County. That's one. Two, you have to understand, if you understand politics and elections, you understand that in the United States, elections are not uniformed. The federal government doesn't tell you, you have to buy this system, this county, you have to buy this, or the state doesn't even tell you that. Each county, each state has its own election rules.
Mm-hmm. Jose, you bring up an interesting point. You know, we have a lot of senior citizens that can't get out and vote. It'd be interesting 10 years or 20 years from now to see if we're able to incorporate the technology that you're stating. I would love to see the day where I can just click on a mouse and vote, and for whatever way we can to make sure it's the actual person that's voting. Is there anything that you think that we can do now to improve, like Jose said, to improve the system, to make it faster, to make it more efficient, to make it fair?
Well, I think when you say efficient, faster, and fair, that's what actually happened with when the E-Slate electronic voting system was introduced in Harris County. A lot of people complain about voting systems, but then they forget what voting system existed previously.
I understand
so
that.
There was a big improvement. So the point is that progress is being made. Now it's the same as voter registration for Hispanics. It's not going to happen overnight. You're an engineer. You know that it takes a lot of work to actually come up with concepts and then to take a concept and make it work and fine-tune it and tweak it here and there to make sure that you come up with a system that's going to achieve everything that you need.
I understand what you're saying.
We're now in the 2000s.
Yeah. I mean, we have mail ballots, right?
Yeah.
People are voting by mail. They don't have to show their ID, do they, when they send in the mail ballot?
Nope.
It's kind of like a trust factor. Is that correct?
Well,
we're trusting that the person that received the mail ballot actually turns in the ballot, correct?
Well, the law is the law, and in Texas, the election code says these are the requirements to vote by mail. If you meet the requirements, then you can submit a request to vote by mail, and you will get a mail ballot, and then you can vote the mail ballot. So
the beauty is that we can change the laws, right?
So we have a caller?
We got a caller calling in. Oh, he's gone now. We had a Howard on the line. So, the good thing is, what you're talking about. We're talking about modernization of the deal. What if, for example, we can actually take our phones, take our own picture, it matches us up. We actually put in our voter registration number and our private code and be able to vote on the phone. Why not? Why can't it happen? I mean, the law can be changed.
Well, the law can be changed, but just to finish, as election administrators, we have to adhere to the law.
And someone can reinterpret
So you're open to suggestions, but right now you just got to go by what laws are in place right now, and that's what you got to adhere to.
Exactly.
Sounds like a plan. I think that was a wonderful recap of what is. We're going to take a quick break right now. We're going to get into the second part of the show. And Hector, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you
Thank you,
for
Hector.
the opportunity.
All right, you're watching Latino Talk TV. We will be right back. Watching Latino Talk TV, I'm your host, Jose Luis Jimenez, and now we have two wonderful guests. We have Mark Campos and Hector Carreno, both two very powerful and very intelligent political consultants, and a little bit of everything else, right?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
A little bit of everything else? All right. Well, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of the show. We're going to talk about the business of politics and why anyone would even have a harebrained idea of becoming an elected official. So why do people do it?
To serve, to make a difference, to make a difference. You know, we're the fastest growing population, and we're underrepresented in a number of governmental entities here in the city and the county, and so we need more Latinos to run, more Latinas to run for office.
Why? Doesn't it cost a lot of money to do all this? How much is an average campaign for different levels?
It all depends. I mean, there isn't a set fee for anything. And costs have come down in the last few years because of the economy. And people do things, they stop doing things that they used to do before. You would see a lot of TV and radio, and people have cut back on that. People used to do 7 to 10 mail pieces, and they've cut back on that. Now you see more robocalls and less mail and some other things of that nature, which are a little bit less expensive, because raising money has become extremely difficult. So you find a lot of people running for office who can either self-fund or have a lot of friends who can give them money, or are being supported by a special interest group who has an agenda that they want to project.
To run for Houston City Council, let's say a district, and it all depends on the size of the district, you know. I mean, they're all the same size in terms of population, but some have more registered voters than the others, you know, like a district I race, a district H race might cost you $125,000, $150,000 to get you in the game. School board races are becoming more expensive, maybe about $90,000 to $100,000 to get you in the game. State representative races in Latino areas, I think if anybody's going to be competitive, they probably need to raise about $125,000, you know. And, you know, I'm kind of one of these people that think that the money is there. You know, there's people that, there's the interest groups that give, the business groups, the PACs, wealthy donors, individual donors, and then in the Latino community, people like Greg, you know, are at the forefront of raising money for candidates, put their money where their mouth is, you know, and you see guys like him, Jacob Monti, a number of successful Latina professionals that are starting to participate, and I think, you know, we you know, the sky's the limit in terms of our community. We're just getting started, you know, compared to when we were, when I first started doing this in the early 70s, you know, a campaign, if you're able to raise 15,000, man, you could do a lot back then, you know, but now things have changed, you know.
Well, you know, it's kind of interesting with the mayor's race. Peter Brown had a boatload of money, but yet was unsuccessful. I know you were on the Gene Locke camp, and you were on the current mayor's camp. What kind of politics behind the scenes was going on as far as raising funds for those three candidates, and how did that affect the actual election?
I think with Peter Brown, a lot of that was his own family money. I mean, he put in a few million that was his own. I think Gene Locke got a whole lot of the, initially he had a lot of the vendors, a lot of the people that do business at City Hall, had a lot of the downtown players, guys like Bob Lanier and folks like that were supporting him because Gene Locke had been a city attorney before. Mayor Parker had a lot of, you know, had a lot of support too. Remember, she had already served 12 years in public office, 6 as a city council member, 6 as a controller, and she'd been involved in politics, and she had a network of donors too, you know. And I think at the end she was pretty much able
Almost
to,
close. She was very close. I mean, she wasn't the top fundraiser, but money is not everything. I believe that the message is more important than money, but if you don't have money, people don't hear your message. So it's the chicken and the egg, which comes first. You need money to be a viable candidate. You don't need the most amount of money, and you need to spend it wisely. A lot of candidates spend money foolishly on things that you don't need or don't impact voters, and they lose. Some candidates like Peter Brown, great guy, but didn't have the personality that people wanted to. They couldn't believe him and wouldn't trust him. So that happens quite a bit. I mean, it happened to Chris Bell when he ran for mayor in 2001. Had a lot of great ideas, but his personality got in the way. And so, there's a combination of things that you need to run for office. It's not all about money. Yes, you need money. And you need people who can raise money and donate money to support you. But you also need to be able to have ideas that are relevant to voters.
Let me give you, for instance, about spending money in a campaign, alrighty? I'm a believer that money needs to be spent talking to the voter, talking to the people that are going to be registered to vote, that are going to be more likely to vote because you want, the outcome is to win the election. If you're running in a district race, you don't go buy a big billboard, the Gulf Freeway and the South Loop, because people are driving to Galveston, to Webster, they're coming in, and they don't live around Hobby Airport, and you're paying a few $1,000s a month for that billboard. Or you don't buy, there was one candidate that rolled out the other day, was running for constable, a neon sign that he was rolling around, which I thought was a waste of money. You want to put your money into talking to voters, either through live phone calls, volunteers going door to door or doing direct mail to them, things like that, So it's a lot of people, they get in this business, they think, hey, do I want to buy, for instance, if you're running in the district race, don't ever buy TV for city council district race, because you're buying TV, you're talking to the people in Fort Bend County and Conroe, in Galveston, all the way to Sealy, and those people aren't voting, at the HCC Community College.
I think that it's important that whatever candidates are actually thinking of or actually running, they've got to understand the dynamics of the business, not only what it's going to take to run the actual position that they're looking after, what it's going to take to be into the hunt, and ultimately, I'm a firm believer that they have to have a little skin in the game. That way, it's just like getting a loan. The bigger down payment, the more the bank loves you, because you got some skin in the deal. And unfortunately, it is harder to raise money today, but it's like any other business. I mean, like you gentlemen's business, it takes that money to run that business. And if they're not willing to make that commitment, it's going to make it tough.
If you're a self-funded candidate and you have all the skin in the game, you have to ask yourself, why are people not supporting me?
Yep.
And if they're not supporting you with giving you a $20 donation, why would they give you a vote? So that tells a lot as well. If a candidate can't have zero ability to raise money, and they're putting up all the money, and then you have to wonder, can they actually get votes? Do they have connections with people in the community who are willing to support them? If they're not willing to support them financially, I don't think they're also willing to support them with a vote. So you have to have, I believe that candidates need to have, be invested in their communities. They need to have connections with communities. And if they don't, I see them as carpetbaggers coming in, raising, whether they have a lot of money or a little money, and going out there and promoting their agenda. Sometimes they have special interest groups behind them. They get elected, and then they're not accountable to the community, and then people are all upset that they call their council member, and their council member isn't making sure that there's garbage pickup, that stray dogs are being picked up, whatever the case may be.
Or just says no all the time.
Or doesn't say anything at all, or worse yet, doesn't return phone calls.
That's even worse.
Which is even worse than saying no.
Speaking of phone calls, we're taking phone calls now. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty being live on the air. The number is 281-846-5079. Call in and join the conversation with us. But let's talk about something. We're talking about skin in the game and getting people to donate. Whatever happened to the days where people actually got elected just because they were good people and they really wanted to serve?
When were those days?
Were they ever here?
Were they ever here?
I don't know. Were they?
Do you remember them? Because I don't.
I'm too
I'm
young.
a little
still,
older than you.
So did those days ever happen? I mean, seriously, back in the day, anything? Or you usually talking about $15,000 campaigns, but back then was that a lot of money back then?
Yeah, that was a lot of
Yeah.
money back then. That was a lot of money back then, you know. And in those days, you know, we used to make our own signs. You know, we used to silk screen them and borrow somebody's warehouse and make our own signs, use wooden stakes. We thought we were high tech when we were using fancy air guns, you know, with the staple, quack, 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 you know. And now everybody gets them from 2 or 3 sign makers that they already come. All you got to do is put them on the things, you know. But, you know, for the most part, if you look at who wins elections, you can pretty much look at the campaign reports, and the people that are winning are the people that are raising money, and usually the ones that raise more money are the ones that win elections, you know. I tell a candidate, you know, or they're thinking to be a candidate, the first discussion we have is, you know, where are you going to get the money? You know, do you know how much it's going to cost? All right, where do you think you can get the money? Do you have any yourself you want to put in? Do you have any friends? You know, things like that. You know, and you know, if they don't have any idea, or if they have some harebrained ideas about how they're going to raise the money, they usually don't raise the money. You know.
You know, you guys are two of the most knowledgeable people about politics here in Houston, and not only city government, but HISD, state, and federal. So how do you foresee the HISD bond program they're going to bring in November? How do you feel about that bond election?
I'll let you go first. I think it's going to be more difficult than people at HISD think. I think there are a lot of questions about the last bond that different communities that supported the bond have. I think those questions need to be answered. I think they need to think about what they're going to use the money for, and is it justified, and how much are people's property taxes going to go up, and who's going to support it. You know, I'm not saying that they don't need the money and that the money isn't needed and improvements don't need to be done to schools, because I think all those things need to be done. But politically, that's a different reality. People vote for things, you know, they want to know, you know, who's getting the contracts. There's been a lot of controversy at HISD, just like...
Well, recently there's been some
Yes.
controversy.
Well, and that, I mean, it's been going on for a number of years now. And just recently it's coming out again and making newspapers. So people have a lot of questions. So is this the right time to be asking bondholders in the HISD district to approve a $1.2 to $1.4 billion bond? You know, that's going to be difficult if the school district did a poll today. I think the poll would show that they would lose. I think it would tell you that voters aren't very happy. So you need to make voters happy. You need to show accountability. It goes back to, why are people not voting? I went yesterday to a polling place and sat with a friend of mine who was running for office, and I was listening to people who came out to vote, and they were all upset. They were all saying they're voting against incumbents, that they're voting for people who can actually get something done, because the bums, quote unquote, the bums who are there now aren't doing a good job. So you have to be very careful when you communicate with voters today. You have to give them a reason to vote for you, because people are, you know, what's the partisanship of America that we've all experienced in the last 3.5, 4 years, that we've all seen, has become to the point that people are picking extreme sides and nobody's in the middle and nobody's willing to compromise. And all that's going to impact on things like HISD or the Houston Community College, who's also thinking of doing a bond. There's a lot of different things, and people need to talk to one another. I think the HISD trustees need to go have a conversation with the HCC trustees, because if you try to pass 2 bonds in the same election for $1 billion+ each, they both could fail.
Here's where the so-called business of politics comes in. They're not going to talk to each other,
no.
Okay? Because they all have different set of consultants. I mean, the HCC wants to have a bond campaign. HISD's thinking about one. Metro might go out there on that mobility fund that they give out to the cities, you know. The city looks like they're going to have a bond campaign. So there's 4 entities that are having elections right now. 4 different set of consultants. All the consultants want to protect, you know, I mean, You know, they need to make a living too, all righty? The good thing about it is that in HISD's case, I've been involved in most of the bond campaigns since 1989 over there. And the ones that are successful are the ones that are held during an even-numbered November election, whether it be presidential or gubernatorial. I mean, they were successful in 2006, I think. No, 2008.
So what you're saying next year would be the best time?
Well, this November would be the best time if they're going to do it. Now, that being said, there's another entity that might put something on the ballot this November. It's called Stop the Magnet. I don't know if y'all have heard of Stop the Magnet, but it's an anti-immigrant, I call it a Latino bashing group that wants to put a charter amendment on the city that have the cops, you know, be able to hassle basically folks that look like us. Alrighty, and so that may be on the ballot. So, you know, there'd be a whole lot of stuff added to, you know, we were also going to vote for the president and all the Democrats versus Republicans. So, you know, right now it's all up in the air. You don't know how the voter's going to be thinking here in Harris County, but the business of it is going to be driven by consultants. Now, all those bond campaigns have to be paid for by somebody. And those somebodies are people like in your business, you know, the folks that are involved in the vendors over there at HISD, at the city, at Metro, you know, and some of them may be, you know, I got a contract at HISD, I also got one at Metro, an engineering firm, and so how much money do I get? How much am I going to get squeezed out of? You know, so that could be really interesting. Nobody's going to back down.
If you look at the presidential election right now and you listen to the pundits on Sunday talking about Mitt Romney raising the money pretty much even to what Obama raised, what type of impact is that give him a leg up on the race, or how do you, your professional opinion?
Well, here's the thing. We live in a state that overwhelmingly votes Republican. I mean, it's trending towards the Democrats, but it's not there. So it all depends whether the Obama administration wants to invest money turning out Democratic votes in Texas. It goes back to the business of politics. There's a finite amount of money. Do you spend money here, or do you spend it in Ohio or Florida or Virginia, which are swing states? And how much do you spend here? And that'll determine the voter turnout. Texas is a donor state. Texas gives more money to Democratic candidates than they get to turn out the vote. So we're constantly giving money to turn out voters. And when Rick Noriega was running for the U.S. Senate, I got a phone call at home from the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee asking me to donate to them. So I asked them, are you spending any of the money in Texas? And they said to me, oh, no, that's not one of our target states. We're actually spending the money. And I can't remember where it was, in Oregon or someplace like that. And I said to them, so why should I give you money? Well, you've given to us before. Why not again? And I said, because I'm not giving any more money to the Democratic Party unless you agree to spend it here.
Well, I kind of take a somewhat different view. Alrighty, as a Democrat, I want the president.
We do that all the time.
Really?
As a Democrat, I want the president to win. Alrighty, and if he's got to come into Texas and grab money so he can spend it in Wisconsin and Ohio and Pennsylvania, I'm okay with that.
ATM state.
Yeah, we're an ATM state. You know, but you know, I think instead of complaining to the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee, we need to complain to the donors here in the state and say, hey, you know, go to their houses, occupy their streets, and just say, hey, why don't you start giving money in 2008 to Rick Noriega, or in 2012, well, you know, we're going to have a Senate race here, you know. The donors themselves need to, and I think the Chronicle addressed it last week when they endorsed a Democrat in the Senate race. They said, shame on you, Democrats, you know, for not, y'all give money to Obama, but you're not giving money to your own guys here in the state.
So the Republicans are doing something right. I mean, it's obvious that the system and the machine that they put in place several years ago succeeded, because the majority of the state is, in many places, Republican. Is it not?
Yeah, and I call it a complete failure of the Democratic leadership that comes out of Austin, the consultants, the folks that have been running the party. I call it running the party into the ground because they've pretty much done that, And I don't see, they've got a Latino that's going to be is winning all the endorsements, that's going to be the next chair of the Texas Democratic Party. And I was having a discussion with him about a month ago. I said, hey, if you keep the same bunch of people that have been making money off of the party, when you take office, you're going to fail. I said, the only way eventually we're going to, turn this state blue, and that's only, it's maybe in a couple of decades. It's only because there's going to be so many Latinos here in the state of Texas, they're going to be voting Democrat.
Well, there's a lot of Latinos that are voting Republican these days.
What's the split now? Is it 60-40 or 70-30?
More or less. It's about a
don't know.
60-40, according to your previous guest. Hector, he told us it was around 60-40.
In a rare, election like when Bush, it's kind of like, Bush was able to get 45% of the vote. There's a myth out there that Bush won the Latino vote when he was, running for president, when he was governor. That's not true. And, even if it's 60-40 or 65-35, keep it that way, because as more and more get into the pool, that's going to be voting Democrat.
Let's talk about a personal story, Mark. Which election that you can think of, and this applies to you too as well, Hector, which election that you participated as the political consultant was really a big time struggle for you and you won? Was there one race that really stands out?
And I won?
And you won.
From
back in the Ben Reyes days or back Al Luna days?
There was a race back when Victor Trevino first ran 24 years ago in 1988. He ran kind of in tandem with State Representative Al Luna, and it's a long story, but. We were taking on, I guess, Ben Reyes and his group at the time. They had a candidate, Raul Martinez, was leaving Constable. He ran against Al Luna, and John Castillo was supposed to be the one to replace Martinez, and that went in the runoff, and it came down to the last boxes reporting, and we won. It's probably one of the most exhaustive races from a Latino side that I've been involved in.
Hector?
To me, it was a race in Chicago that I did for a young man who was a state rep, a two-term state rep, who decided to run for city council in Chicago, and he was taking on a ward organization and who had been in power for 50 years. And they controlled who was elected council member, or alderman, as they call them in Chicago. And we won that race by 122 votes. And I remember that it wasn't just stealing signs that they would do. They would break into his house, throw rocks.
Wow.
They stole his car a few times. It was horrible. And when you're running against a political machine back then, this was in the early 80s, you're running against a powerful organization. And when we won on election night by 121 votes, it was the most gratifying election I was ever involved in.
So was there any here in Houston that you can think of that really stood out?
In 2001, when Orlando Sanchez ran for mayor, even though he lost, what was gratifying that he won the Hispanic vote, and we almost doubled the size of the Hispanic voter turnout. Because I had convinced Orlando to target Hispanics that had become U.S. citizens in the last 2 years who didn't have a voting history, and that's a very dangerous thing to do, because you don't know what's going to happen when they go to the voting place. In our business, you always target people that you know how they're going to vote. And but I thought that by doing it was the only way to increase the Hispanic voter turnout, and it was the only way to give him an opportunity to get in a runoff with the then Mayor Lee Brown, and that was very successful.
In 1991, I'm a big critic of folks that won't invest in the Latino vote already, and one of the investments obviously is you buy Spanish language TV, and because the Univision station is one of the most watched newscasts at 10 o'clock, but it's rare to see a candidate run in the Houston area, buy commercials. In 1991, when Bob Lanier first ran for mayor, you know, they recruited me to work on his campaign, and they said, in order for us to win, we're going to need X percent of our total vote to be Latino. And so they gave me the resources. You know, we had TV, radio, and plenty of it. And we had a message. And in the end, Lanier ended up, he was a guy, when I first got started with the campaign, I said, give me a list of all